Hello, everybody, and welcome to Sage's Tabletop Table Talks. I'm Sage. This is my tabletop. I'm going to talk to you about tabletop role-playing games. My activity hasn't been as consistent as I would like it to be lately. The honest truth is, there's just a lot going on in the homestead I'm working on, and I just a lot of times don't have the energy and mental wherewithal to film these videos. I might make this a bi-weekly series at least through spring while I'm kind of literally getting my house in order. So for the 2 or 3 of you who actually do watch this, if you notice me not posting every week, just know that I'm just extremely busy lately, and I know I record these at it's midnight right now. Just a lot of days I'm just so kind of mentally burnt out that I don't have like a lot of mental energy to film these, but hopefully I'll be back to some consistency soon. Anyway, today's topic, I am going to kind of just do a golden rule when it comes to designing tabletop RPGs. And a lot of people are going to disagree with me on this, and that's okay. But I have found that games that know what they want to be are almost exclusively more fun to play than generic games. So I might kind of make this into a little mini series of golden rules of game design. But ultimately, the number one rule I have for game design is know what you're making. What I mean by that is, so a game like GURPS is the biggest example I have of this, because GURPS as a game is just this vomit of ideas, and there are people out there who defend GURPS. I don't trust those people. I wouldn't trust those people with my children, but they exist. A GURPS just kind of functions like this. You have a couple stats, you have some skills, advantages, disadvantages, and it just vomits like 300 points into your lap and it's like, figure it out. Okay, well, I don't know what I'm supposed to. It's like, oh, here's a magic system. Okay, the magic system has to function this way, though. Like, do whatever you want. As long as magic functions this way, as long as psionics function this way, as long as, okay, but that's not doing whatever I want. This is just kind of 5 half-assed games vomited on top of each other, and it makes your system not good, because GURPS is not a good system. It's kind of a garbage-ass system. But the idea of GURPS is it's supposed to be a game that can replicate anything. It can't, but people pretend like it can, and good for them. But you look at GURPS and you're kind of like, but then, you can contrast GURPS to something like a game I highly praise, Danger Patrol. Danger Patrol, it knows what it is. It knows what it wants to be. It knows what it's trying to emulate. It wants to kind of recreate those kind of Flash Gordon, Buckaroo Banzai, what the hell's the name of the guy? The guy he fought the Huns, but those kind of like sci-fi serialized, like 40s, 50s, 60s, early 60s kind of like hyper silly sci-fi space adventure kind of games. And every mechanic, every element of the game is meant to mimic this. Everything in the game is meant to feel like this kind of wild, insane, very, very silly, very campy, very over-the-top sci-fi game, One of the perfect examples I can think of this is so many of the D20 games, and people out there pretend like the D20 system is this universal system that can be used anything. Oh, you can use the D20 system to make a sci-fi game. Not really. No. And I'll kind of get into some of my design here in a moment. But no, it's not. The D20 system is meant to be an action adventure fantasy gaming system. And it's okay that it does that. If you just take Dungeons and Dragons in and of itself, it's a perfectly cromulent game. It's got a lot of flaws, but every game system does. So it does what it needs to do. GURPS doesn't, because GURPS doesn't do anything. Like I said, Danger Patrol. Oh, anyway, sorry, I was going on a tangent. D20 Modern as a game. A lot of these D20 games, you take D20 Modern. And one of the problems with D20 Modern is stats like Strength and Wisdom just don't really matter anymore, because their Strength and Wisdom just aren't relevant abilities to 2002 real world kind of stuff. But one of the things they had in the system was a list of armor you could wear. Like you could have a riot shield, you could wear, a flak vest, or a riot gear. But they also had shit like chainmail and plate mail. And what fucking person in the year 2003 is walking around with a bronze cuirass on? And the answer is there isn't. But the game still gives us that because you gotta account for everything. It's unneeded. It's unnecessary. It is a waste of space. It's a waste of time to read for the players, because it doesn't actually mean anything to the game you've created. D20 Modern is supposed to be kind of like a high action but semi-realistic modern world game system. It's kind of supposed to be like an action movie, a more grounded action movie, something along the lines of a Taken, honestly. Not quite a John Wick or The Raid, like I said, closer to something like a Taken, maybe a Die Hard. And it's meant to kind of mimic that vibe. And could a character, like, there be a scene, and it has some, you could put supernatural elements in, because they added Urban Arcana, which had supernatural elements. So let's say, well, even if you're not, let's say, you're in your characters somehow managed to find themselves in an antique shop, and one of the characters is like, wait, stop, I have an idea. And they run off, and they come back in the scene, and they're wearing, to help protect them from these, guys with knives, these thugs with knives. He's got a bronze cuirass on. Do I need to know the stats for that? No. The DM can just laugh at that and be like, okay, that's cute. That's kind of a cool thing. Plus, you just plus 2 AC. You have plus 2 AC for the scene. And you just kind of recreate that element when it comes to the thing. I don't need to know. It's got a max dexterity of plus 2. And it weighs. None of that actually matters. None of that actually means anything, because your characters aren't going to walk around with a fucking breastplate on. It's just not going to happen. It's not part of this world. So why add it? And the reason is because a lot of people who design games don't know what they're designing for. Once again, I can point to these kind of these D20 games, because they're a great kind of example to point to. Strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma are core stats in these games. But here's the thing: those core stats do kind of work in this kind of medieval fantasy setting. In a medieval world, characters are going to get into melee combat a lot more. They're going to get into, brawls, and they're going to use swords and axes. And I know, everybody, swords aren't strength weapons, but I've covered this before, that you have a fundamental misunderstanding of what strength is when you're talking about strength in melee combat. It's like, oh, swords are about structure and technique, and strength reflects a lot of that. I don't even know what most people are thinking when they're thinking of strength. Like, if they're thinking lifting, but like, even lifting proper lifting requires good technique. It requires good structure. So I don't even know what the fuck you guys are talking about, other than to be contrarian, which, if you're just saying it to be contrarian, shut up. And if you don't know what the fuck you're actually talking about, shut up. You're not actually doing anything helpful in this community. Just sit down, shut up, and figure some stuff out. But in a medieval fantasy world, characters are going to be getting the sword fights. They're going to be getting into brawls. They're going to have to do a lot more things like smashing down doors and bending iron bars. That's something you're going to see a lot more common of in a high fantasy medieval world. There are also things like poisons and rotten food and scavenging for clean water are things that's going to be more likely than in a world like MechWarrior, where potable water is just kind of a given. Even if you're out in the middle somewhere, usually characters, if you're going to be out in the middle somewhere, are going to carry water filtration devices and iodine tablets and shit that's going to make the water drinkable, because in the year 2323, whatever, I don't remember exactly what year a lot of the MechWarrior stuff takes place. But in the year 2600, a little device you can point to water and clean it is way more accessible than it is in the year 201. Sorry, my cat's doing something weird. Anyway, so, having strength constitution as separate stats make a lot more sense in a game like Dungeons and Dragons. Whereas, if you follow my Let's Design shorts, I kind of talk about a lot of this. But having strength and constitution, or in my case, strength and stamina, as separate stats make a lot of sense, because they're both going to be very useful for adventurers. However, me and a little bit my colleague on this channel, Fox, kind of like kicking around the design for a kind of MechWarrior-ish game. Well, in it, I take strength and constitution, I round it into one stat called body. Because you're so much less likely to be getting into a melee fight. You're probably not going to, and maybe a character might be a brawler, but most characters, even fighty type characters, they're not going to be getting into fights with axes and swords and hammers and staves and fisticuffs. They're gonna shoot guns, because in a world where laser guns are shit you can just buy at the corner store, you're going to use a laser gun instead of a broadsword. Like, longbows, like heavy longbows, require a great deal of training and technique and time to use. A rifle, to be a good sharpshooter it requires, but like, if you're like a soldier on the battlefield, like, knowing how to use a gun requires less dedication than it does learning how to string and use and, properly fire a heavy longbow. So guns are just more accessible than a longbow. So more people are going to use guns in a fight. So combining strength and constitution into one body stat just makes sense. Whereas in a medieval world, characters know stuff, but a lot of those knowledge things are going to be kind of dumped into a handful of lore skills. But in the mech combat game, I have separated general education and mechanical knowledge. Because general education, things like history and, you know, cartography and, you know, physics, mathematics are going to be kind of their own thing. But then things like knowing how to repair vehicles, repair weapons, hack computers. Hack computers isn't a thing that's ever going to happen in a medieval world. And yeah, a medieval world's going to have like arcane magical stuff that is there. But a lot of that is iconically replaced with some cultural elements. Like I said, you know, there's culture and etiquette in a medieval fantasy world, but you're going to see a lot of like history and cultural things be more relevant in a futuristic sci-fi world. But like I said, there's going to be like computer hacking, which is going to be a common thing that is going to be absolutely necessary for like a special forces task force to have somewhere on their thing. The ability to repair machines, the ability to pilot vehicles, the ability to pilot these mechs that are like kind of the center point of the world. These are all things that are like key, and you know there's enough piloting and driving and you know repair skills for this stuff that can basically constitute its own core stat. Something like that isn't needed in a medieval fantasy world. So having intelligence as one core stat in this particular case needs to be separated into two stats, much like the future game body as one stat versus a medieval fantasy adventure game in separated into two stats. Now you can, by all means, if you can find good ways to balance this idea of creating one body stat for characters, like I've seen some games that only have like 4 stats, like a body stat, a mind stat, a charisma stat, and then a magic stat. That's fine if you've got it properly balanced. Like I said, you just gotta really kind of be careful, especially keeping like a body stat as all body, because hand-eye coordination, reflexes, and fleetness of foot are just such a key part of almost any of these worlds that it's kind of its own thing. I removed charisma from my fantasy game because I can't think of something good for it to do other than a handful of social skills, but I've still got it in my kind of mech warrior-ish kind of game because, you know, it's very structured, it's very militaristic, and the ability to, you know, when you accidentally blow up a fuel depot, talk your way out of being court-martialed is key. Being able to get information about enemy coordinates by seducing that hot or even possibly ugly baroness from another nation is something that's going to come up more often than you might think. The ability to kind of know who to talk to get, you know, this illegal modification on your devices that you like, oh man, you know, we're doing this, you know, having this modification is technically illegal, but I know a guy who can get it for us and it would really put us on an edge in this particular fight. So like those kind of social interactions are going to be far more prevalent in a military mercenary kind of game than it is in a game about going into dungeons and fighting monsters. And not to say that characters can't be charming, charismatic characters. I found that it just seems to function better in those kind of games when it's rolled into skills as opposed to a centralized stat. So, you know, I'm looking at, in this game design, what I expect, what as the game designer, I think I expect characters to be doing more often than other things, you know. In a medieval fantasy adventure, they're going to be fighting monsters, delving into dungeons, searching for ancient treasures. Whereas in a military game, they're going to be doing a lot of bureaucratic red tape. They're going to be doing a lot of like ship to ship or machine to machine combat. You know, combat in a fantasy game is going to be a lot of magic and a lot of sword fighting. In a high tech game, it's going to be a lot of laser rifles. So, understanding what your game is and how to thematically portray that to players is important. Like I said, you know, D20 Modern, the game, it has rules for wearing breastplate, and I keep seeing modern games do this, giving players rules for chainmail, rules for plate mail, rules for, you know, oh, here's rules for saber, here's rules for rapier, here's rules for longsword. Okay, it's a game about playing John Wick type characters. And yeah, maybe you want to play a character who's got kind of a gimmick sword thing. You only need one weapon. Sword. Is it a rapier? Is it a, you know, cavalry saber? Is it a traditional longsword? Is it katana? Who fucking cares? That's not the point. It's a weapon that does some extra damage in melee combat. That's all you need to know. That's functionally what it is in a modern day setting. You know, and I'm even kind of low to say this, but like, you know, what sabers and swords and stuff like that have a bunch of different designs in medieval times because they serve different purposes. You know, Kopis had like that hook on it because there was some intent to catch shields and other weapons with it. You know, katana had a curved design because the methodology they used to create a katana gave it a slight bend, and so sword fighters learned to adapt by using that slight bend to their advantage. One of the big ones I can think of is Aijitsu, because Aijitsu, the katana kind of is nice because it has like a natural curve to it, and it makes that draw almost very well mimic the motion of the arm. Although rapier fighting has a quick draw stance as well. I don't think it's as good, but I digress. You know, rapiers were lightweight because they were kind of a civilian weapon that were meant for people to carry on them. It was light, it was simple, I don't want to say simple. Simple's not right. But it was like this lightweight kind of thing that a noble could carry on him in the street for dueling purposes. Whereas, you know, a lot of soldiers still carried, like, cutlasses, which were heavier, and they had a lot of chopping power. They had a lot more weight to them, you know. Subtle movements with the wrist and thrusts require more skill. Now require more skill. There's more training required to use one of them than versus a cutlass, which you could absolutely become a master at a cutlass, but you could give a cutlass to any jackass and be like, this is the sharp part, put this in the other guy, and they can swing, and, you know, other guys who are on the same training level as them. But, you know, you give two people who don't really know how to use a rapier, you're going to get a lot of awkwardness. But in a world where the sword has been supplanted with the gun, it's more important to know, okay, handgun, long gun, beam rifle, missile launcher, sniper rifle. That's a more important thing to differentiate than a difference between a rapier, a katana, and a cutlass, and a cavalry saber. Because those are going to be the elements of your game that you want the players to focus on. But anyway, yeah, that's kind of just my rant. I'm 24 minutes. I think this is long enough for tonight. Yeah, but just, if you're going to design a game, design what you want the players... think about what you want the players to do in your game and design the game around that. Don't try to take another game like Dungeons and Dragons, like GURPS, like Rifts, like Storyteller, and force those elements into your game. It is okay, even if you're using Storyteller as your base, to get rid of the social stats. Yeah, okay, my game's not really going to be very social, but it is going to have a lot of magic elements. You can cut the 3 social, which are stupid. I hate the 3 social stats in White Wolf games because they just do the same thing. Cut them down. Okay, you have a spirit column. You have charisma, but you can also have mystical attunement as well as intuition as kind of like your 3 spirit stats. But anyway, yeah, that's fine. Just remember, if you're designing a game, that your game design is going to push players where you want them to be. And if you're designing a game around where you think the players are going to be, the elements are going to line up, and the game's just going to run smoother. You can even look at Dungeons and Dragons and how awkward and how boring and pitiful people who make it into like courtesan games make it. I have never played a court themed D20 game that wasn't just teeth gnashingly boring. Now, I've played them in other systems. I've played them in oh shit, I can't for life remember what the game system was called. But, a game like Pendragon, absolutely, being, courtly kind of social games are more fun. Even a game like Paranoia, it's all backstabbing, but, the game kind of pushes you in that element. D&D pushes you into going into caves and fighting goblins and zombies until you find a cool sword. That's what the game wants you to do, and when you're not doing that, the game mechanics aren't fun. It's not as fun. And people who are like, oh no, it's perfectly fun. No, it's not fun. You're not having fun because of D&D. You're having fun despite it. You're having fun because you're with people you like, with people you enjoy spending time with people you want to be around, and you're having fun with the game. Is there anything wrong with that? Of course not. By all means, keep having fun. But you can't tell me that a game like that is more fun than a game like Blue Rose or a game like some of the PBTAs. Oh, sorry, I about threw up when I praised Powered by the Apocalypse. But games that are intended to be courtly games, like that's their design philosophy. Those games are what you want to play. You just don't want to spend $15 to help an independent studio. You'd rather spend, $400 on a giant corporation who literally sent soldiers to a person's house over fucking playing cards. Let's not fucking forget that. I will never stop banging that drum because everybody else has forgotten, but I fucking haven't, and I will not stop calling Wizards of the Coast and Hasbro out on this shit. But yeah, you'd rather spend $600 to make a billionaire CEO rich than help a game designer. It's fine, whatever, I get it. Your money, do whatever the fuck you want with it. I am absolutely calling you guys out, but it doesn't matter really at the end of the day. It's just fucking dice. It's just fucking dice games, But yeah, just remember, if you're designing a game, think about the kind of games that you want run in your system and design around that, not the other way around. But anyway, almost half an hour. I'll see you guys next week, 2 weeks, sometime in the future. Hopefully sooner rather than later. Keep watching my Daily Dumb Questions. Keep watching my Let's Designs. Subscribe, like the channel. We're growing, and it's a beautiful thing, and it's just amazing because, honestly, it's just me and Fox have been putting so much work into the channel. putting our time, putting our mind, putting our energy into this channel, and watching it just slowly grow has been a wonderful thing. And for all of you who watch these videos, and for all of you who like, and all of you who comment, and all of you who subscribe to the channel, I just thank you all. It's amazing to see, and I love you all, and have a wonderful weekend. Have a wonderful week. Mondays suck. Bye.